Floating industrials. This is going to be one of the most in-depth videos you can find on this particular piercing. We're going to cover everything from pros and cons, which is the main subject. We're also going to cover things like the piercing experience, living with the piercing, abandoning the piercings, what you should do, prepare beforehand or think about, etc. Coming up next on Pros and Cons by a Piercer, Season 2, Episode number 76. For those that are new to the channel, welcome to the Body Piercing and Tattooing channel. I hope you're enjoying the videos. Hope you're finding them helpful and useful, but you may not know who I am. My name is DaVo. I'm a professional body piercer and have been since 1994. I own and I operate the Axiom Body Piercing Studio located right here in Des Moines, Iowa, inside Skin Kitchen Tattoo. Now, what we're going to talk about today is a very unique piercing. It's unusual. It's not very common. Basically, what it is that we take a traditional angle of like a helix to helix piercing, or maybe even helix to conch industrial, and bend the jewelry or construct the jewelry to fit so that it goes about halfway. Instead of going all the way to that back helix, it goes in as a flat. So it can look like there's an industrial starting in the front and this bar's just hanging there. It can be kind of a very unusual and unique piercing to have. Now, as far as the history of this piercing, it is very modern. I know that I saw photos probably somewhere in a magazine or whatever of people having things similar to this back in the late 90s, but as far as becoming kind of a standardized practice, it's probably been the last 5 to 10 years. Prior to that, I don't remember seeing it very often at all. Now let's get into the pros, the advantages, things that make you go, hey, this might be the piercing for me. Starting with the number one, which is it's a solution or replacement for an industrial. If you want that industrial look on the top of your ear, it allows you to have that look when you don't have the anatomy to get that particular piercing. It kind of allows you a lot more options as far as the angle the piercings are at and etc. But it also can pierce an ear that normally we couldn't do an industrial on and have you heal it safely or without issues. Number two, it's a very unique and unusual look. It can look like you have this piercing with this barbell that's magically floating on one side, depending on the jewelry choice and style. It's very unique, kind of cool, kind of tricks the eye, makes you go, hey, wait a second, is that really attached to something? So it's something that you're not going to see very often in daily life. Number three, can often be done with existing piercings, with a caveat to that. If you have a well-healed forward helix, or not forward helix, but vertical helix in that area, or a flat, if the angle's correct and it can be used and the jewelry size to that, you could use that piercing as kind of a starting point and build off of it with the jewelry. This can sometimes work, sometimes not work, because sometimes it places that, if that jewelry isn't just dead on, bent correctly, or assembled correctly with the right lengths and etc., it can cause a healed piercing to suddenly start acting up and causing issues. So consider that beforehand, but it is possible. Number four. You can use very unique and different looking jewelry. You can do unique bends like curves and circles and etc. I've seen. You can also do where they have balls that you take one barbell and you attach it, and then you do another barbell. So there's a lot of other options as far as the jewelry. It comes down to the creativity of the piercer who's doing it, their skill level, etc., and what jewelry is available for that particular piercing at that time. And I kind of already mentioned this. It's kind of a double. It goes with a unique look. It is a rare piercing. This is not a common piercing that you're going to see every day. This is one that you're going to see maybe every once in a while. It makes it a cool piercing, especially if you're starting out on a big ear project, to kind of start a showcase piece and then build off of. It's not something you're going to see like every day, or go to a rock show and see 15 people with it. It's definitely something you're not going to see very often. Now let's move on to the cons, the disadvantages that make the things that make you go, nope, no, not for me. Nope. Rather not. Starting with number 1. Your anatomy may not be suitable for this particular style of piercing, and it comes down to the shape of that flat area at the top of the ear. Some of us, it's more folded, or it'll be more like a bubble or a mountain, or even, peaked. Some of those are just not going to work because there's not enough space for the jewelry, the bar, to be free of contact with it. Also, it can make the angle of the piercing of the flat very difficult, and if it isn't dead on and the jewelry's bent perfectly, it will cause issues, including bumps and other problems. So it's one of those piercings that, yes, it's more open as far as anatomy, but there are people out there that still aren't good candidates. Number 2, because you're dealing with 2 types of ear piercings, they can be difficult to heal, especially when you're holding them in this strict kind of position. It can be as difficult to heal, if not more so, than just a traditional helix. Even if you have the best anatomy, they can be very, very difficult to heal and take an extremely long time to heal. It's one of those things that takes a huge commitment. You're going to probably have additional maintenance than you would have with maybe just an ear piercing, like a helix piercing. You need to take that into consideration before you get this done, basically because it's going to be a little bit more of it ain't going to be a pleasure cruise, to say the least. So it's something you want to consider beforehand. Number 3, the jewelry often has to be bent or designed to fit the piercing perfectly, which means that you have very limited access to different off-the-shelf type of jewelry. Unless you have a steady supply of the knowledge and expertise it's going to take and the tools to bend it safely and sterilize it, it's something you're pretty much going to have to go back to that piercer every time you want to change the jewelry or adjust it. It's not something that you're going to be able to go on the internet and buy something for. Because they tend to be kind of locked into these standards of width and et cetera. And even how we bend the angle that goes into the flat or the helix can be slightly different than it would be if it was just straight, maybe a little bit past 90 degrees, basically because of the shape or contour of the area. So it's really something that you kind of get that first piece, and you might be stuck with that first piece unless you can find somebody that can bend the jewelry correctly, or you can find something that's assembled correctly. Number 4, even after this piercing has healed, you cannot sleep on this piercing. The same thing with industrials, the helix. Oftentimes, even after you've healed them, if you sleep on them for a couple nights, they'll suddenly flare up, regardless of how long you've had them. And it may take 10 or 15 years for that to change. So it's really a long-term commitment from that standpoint, that this is not a piercing that is going to suddenly not be an issue to sleep on. Number 5, can affect wearing glasses, sunglasses, hats, also over-the-ear headphones, etc. Because of that, pressure will cause issues, especially during the healing process. It may be a problem. So I really don't advise using any of those things during healing. Even afterwards, these things tend to get caught on things, and you do need to take that into account even after the piercing is healed. That's part of living with the piercing, is dealing with that. Now, let's get into preparing to get the piercing and what you should know. The first one being is if you are employed, or work in, or are planning on becoming employed, or are involved with organized sports or activities where there's a possible dress code that does affect whether or not you can wear piercings, you need to check that out. Talk to them, talk to your coach, talk to your boss, talk to people that work in that industry before you get the piercing done, because nothing is worse than having or being forced to abandon a piercing just to be part of daily life. Now, tolerance for piercings has greatly increased over the last few decades. Hopefully this won't be a long-term thing, but especially with sports activities, it has kind of become the norm that you might be able to get away with a few lobe piercings, but anything beyond that you can't have to compete. So understand that going in, and make sure that you do your research beforehand. The next thing is your piercer themselves. Do they have the expertise? Have they done this piercing before? How long have they been piercing? What jewelry do they have in stock? All of these things are questions that you need to ask before you go in and get a piercing done by them. With this one, it takes another level of skill than it would say even doing a traditional helix-to-helix industrial. It's going to take it because they need to know how to bend the jewelry. They need to know how to move the jewelry. And because this piercing is probably going to involve some adjustment and reduction in length over the period, because we have to kind of keep things away from it for the swelling, and then we can kind of back off that later. They're going to need to be there and establish that when you need help or you need a new piece of jewelry, let's say 2 years from now, they're going to still be there. Kind of already covered this, but understand that this jewelry is kind of unique. Often it needs to be custom bended and fitted just for your piercings in your ear. It is not a skill that all piercers have, and it may need to be adjusted over time, as piercings can kind of migrate a little bit here or there, or the jewelry may need to be not so loose. So understand this going in. The next one, this piercing demands isolation and avoiding contact. So plan ahead. Have everything kind of set up beforehand to avoid sleeping on it. Also, make sure that with hair and etc., you have a game plan on keeping that away from it, especially when it's wet, etc. Plan ahead. That you have to understand this piercing area, this is going to be off limits for probably a year at least. So plan ahead. Have that game plan in place before you even get the piercing. The next thing would be cross-contamination prevention, and I'll cover that a little bit more in depth. You have to understand that there is going to be certain activities, certain things that you're not going to be able to do, and that and other practices that you're going to have to change in your daily life before getting the piercing, because it's going to take that to heal it properly and avoid infection. But I'll go into those in depth here later on. Next thing, considering, check with your piercer, see if they supply aftercare products. Do they go over the aftercare instructions in person? Do they cover that? What information? Do they give you written instructions? What have you? Find out this stuff ahead of time. There are a number of studios, even the ones that are supposedly high quality, that don't take the time to actually sit down and discuss how to take care of a piercing. I find this insane. They may give you it's gotten to the point now where people are giving people QR codes that have a web page, and that's just the written instructions they've done, and that's it. That's all you get. This piercing takes a little bit more intense healing, so having that information and be able to discuss that with your piercer is very important. Also, they should do a consultation before they even consider doing this piercing that covers what it's going to take to heal it, how long it's going to take to heal it on average, any risks that are involved, whether or not you have the anatomy that's correct for it, jewelry options, etc. They should talk to you before they have you sit down to do this. Kind of to drive this home, this piercing does take a commitment to heal. This is not something that is going to heal very quickly. It is going to take some time to actually sit down and heal this. So you need to be sure that you're ready to take that commitment before you get it done. Now let's talk about the piercing experience itself. On a level of 1 to 10, I usually say the pain on this one could be between a 3 and a 7. It varies greatly from person to person. A lot of it comes down to what your pain experience is in general. First off, the first thing we do is we do a consultation, kind of covering the things I just talked about a little while ago, and then we select the jewelry. Have you fill out a waiver. Then we do the measuring and the bending of the jewelry, adjusting it to where we think it's going to work best. Next, we sterilize the jewelry, and then we start the setup process of getting out all the equipment we need to do it. Also, we're going to go ahead and disinfect the area and then mark it. At this point in time, I always like to eyeball the jewelry, bring it up, and kind of give a physical look at in comparison to where those markings are at. They may have to, at this point in time, bend or adjust the jewelry so it fits better, and then we take it from there. Because you can't really see the side of your ear, it's a good idea to take a photo with a phone or your friend's phone so you have kind of an understanding of what we're exactly doing. It can be kind of difficult to see the side of your head. I don't know. Some people are really good with the 2-mirror trick. I've never been great at it. I'll admit it. If you wear glasses on a regular basis, you do want to probably try them on and make sure to ensure that they're not going to have contact with the piercing area or where the jewelry is going to be positioned. Now, with this one, I usually start with the front and do the helix piercing through and then insert the jewelry using a guide pin. Then we will do, I usually will put the end on, bring the jewelry back, make sure that it is lining up and there's looseness to the point if we need it for swelling. Then I will check the mark to make sure we have it at the right spot. Then we'll inject the needle in and through and then guide the jewelry through with a guide pin. Once that's done, then we close the jewelry, and there we're done. Usually with this type, I like to put a ball in the front and a flat disc in the back, just basically because it gives it a little bit more clearance. I don't know if I specified that before. Afterwards, there might be a little bit of slight bleeding off and on for a few minutes. This can kind of bleed just basically because the jewelry insertion can be a little complicated. With this, you're dealing with a tight space and not a lot of options on how to get it on there. In some cases, I have used hemostats to get the ends on. So you might see a little bit of slight bleeding. There'll be a little bit of throbbing and aching and that usually lasts about 3 to 5 minutes. Then it's going to be very tender to the touch for a while. One thing is the jewelry probably you want it a little bit of loose fitting just to allow for swelling and inflammation. And that will need to be adjusted over time. Now it's time to move on to healing. With healing on this, I would say the average healing time is 6 months to a year. Cleaning twice daily using a sterile saline spray. Personally, I like Neomed's Piercing Aftercare. Comes in a fine mist. If you cannot find that, there are plenty of alternatives on the market. The main things you want to look for is that it comes in a pressurized steel can or metal can. It says sterile on it, and when you look on the back, the only ingredients that are listed is water and sodium chloride. Nothing else. The other thing I suggest doing is at the end of your shower, rinsing it under running water. Not only does this feel kind of good, it's kind of soothing, but what we're trying to do with these two things is remove that discharge, so it's kind of an added thing. Plus, when you're in the shower, it makes sure and kind of ensures that you have all the any hair products used or whatever off the jewelry. Now, to reduce swelling, I would suggest avoiding contact of any type. Also, for the first week or so, try to sleep with your head elevated above your heart. That will reduce the swelling somewhat. You can use ice packs. Basically, the easiest way to do that is use crushed ice in a Ziploc bag and then wrap a paper towel around it and lightly lay it to the area. There shouldn't be pain involved when you set it against it. That can help a little bit. I am not a doctor or physician or anybody that can prescribe medication, but some people find anti-inflammatories over the counters helpful. If you've never had issues with it, it shouldn't be a problem. Now, the swelling on these can last up to 5 days, sometimes longer. They are just one of those piercings. It's not quite as drastic as you're going to see with like a tongue piercing, but your flats are prone to swelling on their own, and because you're adding another element to that, they can swell a little bit longer. Must practice cross-contamination prevention. Basic things. Clean your hands before you handle it. No oral contact or exchange of bodily fluids on you around the piercing. Keep pets away from it. Don't let them sleep in the bed with you, especially smaller animals that sleep right next to your head. Avoid contact with wet hair, hats, headbands, helmets, glasses, phones, over-the-ear headphones. Any of these things need to be disinfected on a regular basis or completely avoided. Avoid playing with the piercing or causing excessive movement. Both of those things will lead to issues. Now, as far as what you can expect, off and on for the first 3 to 5 days, you might see a little bit of slight bleeding. There'll be some redness, discolorization, heat, tenderness to touch, and, of course, swelling. Jewelry. Barbells should be internally threaded, titanium, best option, or solid 14-karat gold nickel-free. With this one, basically, you're probably better off to start out with titanium, a cheaper version, than the possibility of, and I don't know any piercer out there that probably would feel completely comfortable bending a gold bar. I don't know. That's tricky, man. That's expensive. Jewelry should be left in at all times. Only taking out to replace. Pretty much with this piercing, they're kind of a forever jewelry in kind of piercing. It's just like industrials. You can change them if you wish, but it's not something you want to leave out for a long period of time. One thing that's kind of a misconception is that flexible tubing and plastics are a better option. They're not. All they're going to do is allow this piercing to move out of position and then cause it later on to be a situation where, well, the jewelry doesn't fit, and this angle on this piercing's like this one, and this one's like this, and it isn't going to work anymore. The other problem is with plastics is we don't know how safe it is. We don't know what the material is actually made out of, and in fact, it could possibly be toxic. So, no plastics. Ends should be checked on a regular basis to make sure they're on there tight. You don't need to unscrew them or anything. I generally suggest do it weekly. Just kind of pick a day of the week that you want to do it and call that ball checking day and check it every Tuesday or Wednesday. The last thing is, if you have a situation where a medical emergencies came up or whatever, if you were concerned about the piercing closing, wearing glass jewelry in the piercing will keep it open. It isn't conductive. Usually doesn't show up on MRIs or cause issues. The problem is leaving it in for a long period of time may cause the piercings to move out of alignment and may require you to go back to your piercer and have them bend it or adjust it to fit correctly. Now let's talk about living with a piercing. I already suggested that you check the ends on a regular basis. Weekly is always your best bet. Just get in the habit, get in the routine, and just do it throughout the time you have the piercing. Because nothing sucks more than losing jewelry ends and losing piercings because of it. Even after the piercing is healed, if you suddenly discover that you have discomfort, swelling, etc., contact your piercer, have them take a look at it, and make sure something hasn't happened. A jewelry adjustment may be needed, or a new piece of jewelry, or a proper cleaning, or something else has happened. So even 3-4 years into it, if you start experiencing these problems, it's not a bad idea to go see your piercer and see what can be done. This piercing needs to be isolated long after the piercing is healed. It is going to get caught on things. It is going to get snagged on things. It is going to have contact with things. The more you avoid those things, the healthier the piercing will be in the long run. And I've already said this, but leave the jewelry in at all times. Only take it out to replace it. There's no reason to take the jewelry out and clean it and do all this other stuff. It's usually best just to leave it in. If you do need the jewelry cleaned, take it to your piercer, have them do it. Most of us do have an ultrasonic tank or one that's separate, cleaner, just for cleaning jewelry. Now let's talk about abandoning the piercing itself. Now, if the piercing is still healing and there is no signs of infection or other problem, taking the jewelry out is just going to probably cause the holes to close. Nothing really drastic or anything beyond that. Do keep an eye on it just like you would any other puncture wound. Monitor it, and if you see any signs of infection or problems, seek medical advice. If the piercing is healed and there's no signs of problems, removing the jewelry shouldn't be an issue. It will probably take a while for it to completely close. You are going to be left with some scarring one way or another, regardless of how long you have it. The industrials have a tendency to kind of change the look of the ear long after the jewelry is out. It can take a long time for them to close completely to the point where they're unnoticeable, and it probably will never get to a point where somebody with a trained eye can't look at it and go, yeah, you had one. That's just part of the thing. If there are signs, if the piercing is healed, but suddenly you're seeing signs of infection or abuse or other problem, seek advice before removing the jewelry. Go see your piercer. I'm sure any reputable piercer, if it's beyond their help, they're going to happily go, hey, go see your doctor. This is beyond my level of expertise or knowledge. But yeah, it's a good idea if there's problems before you take the jewelry out, have them take a quick look at it and make sure it's safe to remove the jewelry. Even with a healed piercing or one that's closed, it's not uncommon for your body to produce what's called sebums. And it's this waxy, oily, kind of cream cheese kind of feeling stuff, has a very distinct odor to it. It's not uncommon for your body to produce this. It's completely safe. It's not something you worry about. It's not infected or anything like that. Just clean off the area with warm water and soap should take care of it. It shouldn't be an issue beyond that. And a lot of people, they say, I only get it when I squeeze it. Well, there's no reason to squeeze a closed piercing. I know we're obsessed with that, squeezing and popping things, but the reality is your body will just naturally produce it, and sometimes it produces more of it around scar tissue. One last thing on abandoning a floating industrial. You may be able to save both the piercings but not have it be a floating industrial anymore, meaning you may be able to put other jewelry in one or both of them and go for a completely different look. If you still want to have them connected, you could put a chain there and have them both connected and have that your new showpiece. So even if you're at the end of it and you're just done with it, you just want something new, talk to your piercer. There are other options than having one bar in there. And a lot of times, if it's healed well and it's well seasoned, there is a lot of options out there. Do you have one of these? Leave a comment. If you have other questions or something I didn't cover, which would be surprising to me, feel free to leave a comment. Till next time, here's hoping all your piercings heal with ease and without a single issue. And if you're in the Des Moines, Iowa area, I would love to see you for your piercing needs in the future. Have a good day, everybody. Take care, and check out this other video.